Maybe that's another reason why showing the live, attending live is not necessarily required, but would love to have some input onto that, whether you think it's worth any restrictions or what we could do to encourage people to participate in these webinars rather than just watch the videos later on. If you've got any thoughts on that, let me know. But today is all about capturing content and capturing it from Excel. One of the big things that we developed about a few years ago now that really made it easier to capture information from Excel was the ability to copy paste data from Excel into Unify. And we've been expanding and expanding and expanding that. And so in Unify 17, there's a couple of more additional areas of the business that you can do that in, but I thought it's worth just going through the concept in general first, and then we'll cover off the specifics of Unify 17 towards the end. So what I'm first going to do is go back in time and just look at the problems that sort of arise through a file upload methodology when using Excel and wanting to import data in. And the main concept behind that is it's a bit of a black box. To demonstrate that, our budget import is still a file upload. We are going to convert it at some stage, but it hasn't been done yet, and it still hasn't been done for 17. And so you need to actually upload a file from Excel to get it in as a budget. I'm just going to sort of show what that means. So what I'm in the cost module now. I've selected a code structure called NPWC, National Public Works Committee. And what I want is a juicy budget. So again, I'm not sure everyone knows about this, but these tables here, obviously we now got the 17 charts that can come in the middle of it, but if I turn those off, these tables are sortable. So you can sort on one of these columns at a time. So I'm just going to do 2 clicks on approved budget, gets me highest to lowest here. That looks quite juicy. So I'm going to click in on Coles Miranda. So now I've drilled in on a particular project. I didn't select it from here. I just clicked the link and you have the budget subnav. And the easiest way to get an understanding of the format, actually, we were doing NPWC. Let's do that one. There we go. The way to get the format of, and I should say as well, it shows the code there because it depends on what you have in the defaults for that particular project. So if I just duck over to summary for a second, it's what you select here. So because I have post contract selected here, when I click on costs, it tries to drag me back to that one as being the main one until you actually select NPWC, and then it remembers that for your session until you come back to it another time or change it manually. Now, so here we have an NPWC structure. We've added some project specific ones in there, so it's actually 4 levels deep. Now these columns here, again, maybe you're not aware of, these are calculated columns that you can define yourself based off project custom fields that you've keyed in. So if you key in a floor area, either FICA or GFA, or a net lettable area, then you can then create a formula that divides every single row here by that number to give you a dollar per square meter rate. You can also create a whole bunch of them below as well for whole of project type metrics, like the whole project's floor area cost. A dumb one. And some ratios there between quantities. So you would have seen there's lots of quantities in this particular estimate. Roof to floor quantity ratios, external doors to floor sanitary fixtures, etc. So you can generate those. And then if I want to get the structure of the budget, the way I write to import it in for a different one, the best way to do that is just to click export. It's still not the easiest thing to set up, but this at least gives you the structure. And you'll see that with this particular structure, the coding for the levels is done by having them as extra columns. That's going to be a little bit different to the contract deliverable import, where there'll be a level column. So it'll just be one column, and you say level 1, level 2, level 3, depending on which level that particular deliverable is. But for this, level 1 in preliminaries is under the code 1, level 2 preliminaries under the code 2, and any specific project items under code 3. Then we have quantity, unit, and rate, and a total. Now, that's the structure you need to successfully file upload a budget, but equally what you need is a name range. And so when you export from Unify, it automatically puts that range in. But if you were creating something where you were linking this from some other estimating spreadsheet that you had, and you wanted to automatically upload that in, you might have 20 tabs in here that have been used to build up that estimate. then you can name the area called budget, and that's the area that Unify will look for. So if I was to go F5 and say go to, and I click that, it'll highlight the area that's budget. Even if you've had, 20 or 30 different other tabs with different information in there, it's only going to use this area to import the budget. So if I save that, because it's exported it as read-only, I really don't like this particular interface, but I'm sure others do. I don't want to go mouse. That took a lot longer than I thought. Let's go to documents. And so I now have a spreadsheet that's saved in the right format. And let's just test it out, try and randomly pick something that's blank. So here we have NPWC, there's nothing in it. I click import, I browse, I find my files, copy of budget, and I click import. So all of this is now a bit of a black box, right? We're hoping it works. If it doesn't work, it gives you a reference here. So you've got quantity multiplied by rate does not equal budget. That's just a warning. So that's actually still come in. So if I then click back up, I will have all the budget there. It's just there's a rounding error that it's brought up to point that out. And when it does those errors, it actually references the cell. So reference row 18. So if you come back into the spreadsheet and you select row 18, it's saying that if you times those two together, you get, say it's 1.65 and 165. Unify's brought it in as 1.17, doesn't add up. So it's just an error warning there that doesn't stop it from coming into the system, but just subtle rounding difference. So you can get as many of those errors as you like and then work through it line by line, but it's a little bit, I don't know, black box, is a little bit hard to tell what's going on. So that's how we did it for the first, say, 12, 13 years of existence. And then the last few, we've started to change to this copy paste. And so to move on to that one, so I just thought it worth demonstrating why we changed, and hopefully this part of the demonstration will kind of make that clear. What we've moved away to is to bring the data into Unify through a copy paste window. And one of the new ones, it's Unify 16.5. It's been around for a little while now, but an early release to a few clients, but it's been a really popular one, is importing and creating projects from scratch. And so what I've got here is a list of projects that you might have gotten from an accounting system, or you might have had some other project system before you incorporated Unify, or wherever the data is coming from. One of our clients dumps project financial information out of their accounting system every month and pastes them into Unify to get tracking, and use Power BI to do visuals of that information that they can't get from their accounting system. So there's a few different use cases here. So you get that nice dump of data. And the key here is that it's sort of flat table, but it doesn't matter if there's stuff you don't want to bring in. It can be kind of, as long as it's structured as a flat table, you can have any kind of junk, and the fields can be labeled however you like, hint, hint, hint. And so when you then paste this in, what you do is from the summary, there'll be an import button. And you'll see that this big square comes up that is a paste area for you're pasting in your Excel. And so I've just pasted the data from Excel into here. And you can see, again, the field names are meaningless, right? And so what you can do is, doesn't matter that in English, you can then decide which Unify field you're going to map that particular we don't have priority, that particular field to. And that can include, if I click this drop down, a whole heap of other project related metadata, including project costs. And so I'm going to tick cost, revenue, roles, then it'll bring in custom fields. And these are grouped then by the custom field categories that you can create. I just did air quotes and I'm not on webcam, so you wouldn't have seen it. That's pretty funny. Project custom fields, which don't have a category, would come into here. And then these are categories of custom fields that you could import into if you tick those boxes. So I'll just tick building functional unit. So that means that those fields are now mappable to the spreadsheet. So once I do that, what I can do is come to this particular one, and you can see it's people. And what I'm able to do with that is to, if you scroll down, it'll have like these little dashes between each section. And you can see there's costs and then there's revenue and then there's roles. And you can say, I want to map this to the client role. And unfortunately it's got both there. So this isn't going to work, but it'll show you the validation. You'd need to clean that up in that just have the person's name. So say match on contact name, and that will then bring them in matching on that contact name or create them if they don't exist. I'm not 100% sure actually that's true. I think it just throws an error if they don't exist, because we want some control around the creation of resources, which I'll demonstrate in a copy paste in a moment. So then other ones you can do, you can see you can do start and end dates here. So you've got your actual start, actual finish, forecast, finish, baseline. So we could say that's baseline start. We could say that's baseline finish. And then you can also do money. So you can see this has got money. If I was to go down to the cost section, what happens when you select it and say this is the budget for this project? Then you can actually say which budget. So we've got lots of different coding structures. We mentioned MPWC. And then you can say actually which code to bring it into. So you can have multiple lines of budget along this particular import and import them into separate codes there. And then finally, it will do this one here, which is a role again, and we'll say project manager, and you'll see contact. So whenever you select this, it dynamically updates, for something else. We don't have any custom field information in here, so we're just going to ignore that. Now, a couple of things about this. If you are importing a change to the project manager or maybe the metadata that's here, then you wouldn't need to map all of the required fields like sector and project type and life cycle phase. However, if this project list includes new projects that you want generated, then you would actually have to go through and map each of these columns into the mandatory fields. And again, though, the system will tell you this without needing to do the black box, because what happens is you come down the bottom, you click validate, and it's basically running through all of those lines, and it's saying 127 rows out of 507 validated incorrectly. And if you hover over it, it's going to say that those contacts don't exist because it's got all of those company names in brackets after it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove that, make that no mapping, and I'm going to validate again. But you can see it's giving you the red line, it's giving you the hover capability. What's wrong with that one? We're down to 16 now, getting closer. So then it's validating license levels. And so Bernard Neeson is only a project manager, and in terms of his license level, and roles have access levels on top of that, and project manager role has a program manager access level. So that's pretty confusing. But anyway, again, it's validating what's wrong with each of these, and you can hover over each one and it's probably the same. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that one already has a budget in there. So it's basically done a lot of data quality analysis around each row to make sure that it's all good to go. And hence you're not going to import junk is the goal. And it's very interactive. You're not black boxing. You can really see what's going on. And then if you're happy that the 491 that validated correctly are okay, and you can't be bothered fixing the other 16, and you don't want to manually sort of go back and remove them from the spreadsheet, which would be quite painful, you can just import, and it'll bring 491 rows in. In this instance, it's actually only going to update information on those 491 because these projects already exist in the system. And that's why it didn't validate any errors around not having mandatory fields, because they already exist. And it's matching on project ID to update that. So say your strategic, your business developed a new strategic plan and you went away, and so it says now 491 rows imported successfully. You might need to update all of your sectors. You might change them, right? Or you might change your lifecycle phase. You could dump this information out from Excel, which I'm going to show you how, from Unify to Excel, which I'm going to show you how to do in a moment, and then update them in Excel with find and replace and that type of thing, and then import it back in again, and you would have updated your sectors. You'd obviously have to change them in the configuration, but that's only changed once, and then export out, import in, and you're good to go. Now that export out and import in can be done through the reporting module. And so last week I mentioned in the reporting module that anytime you see the word export, not export log, but export at the end of a report, then that's the one you can use. That will be a nice way to export data out, change it, and import it back in. And so you'll see here, there's one called, actually, I think it's in program. My apologies. Project summary export. So that's the one you would use to export to Excel to basically change all those sectors if you happen to do that. And so if I just run that to Excel, it'll click that, and it'll actually be the same screen as I had before, except that it allowed for parent IDs in here. So yeah, that then means you can change the sectors, these project types, service lines, and it'll already have all of the mapping done for you because it'll know about these particular ones. I just happened to change those to see if anyone noticed my egg. And so once I've done those changes, I copy paste it back in the way I did before. So another one, because I'm going to close that down. Another one that I can do with that type of capability, you would have seen just, hang on, resumes hovering up the wrong way. You would have seen just below this report, sorry, just above it, project risk export. So we're going to give that one a go. And that'll be our next import to demonstrate. I'm going to do all projects so that we get some, because I think in this database there's not a lot of risks. And so the key with these exports, as opposed to the other reports, is they don't stick any logos in. They're just flat tables. You can see here, flat tables of information that you can then use for various things. I'm going to enable editing on this one, remove project ID, and highlight the range. So Control Shift and arrow keys highlights the ranges. It's quite handy. And so I have my area here highlighted for risks. And I'm now going to come back into my major project system, go to risks, and I'm just going to do this against a project. And you can see now the import button's there again. So that import button will appear contextually, have a different routine depending on which part of the system you're in. So a colleague of mine in the UK emailed me saying, hey, the project summary, the project import doesn't include risks. And it wasn't because that functionality doesn't exist. Just the expectation is you would go to the risks module to do that import, whereas you do, metadata around projects like people. I mean, that budget one is a little bit, left field, importing that cost in. It's basically been developed because of that client I mentioned that dumps data from accounting systems. But yeah, it's there. You can also import from costs and revenue, the whole budget as well. But for risks, you go to the risk module and you click import and you click paste. Now it does include custom fields, so you can go nuts with your extra bit of metadata you want to have for categorizing risks. And you can see that because it's come from Unify, it's identified the tasks automatically in general. Didn't pick that one up. Or maybe I've mapped these before. So as soon as you've mapped these fields before and you do it again, it'll instantly recognize what you're talking about, and you won't have to map it again. So if you're doing this on a regular basis, you don't need to do this. I guess it's going to work that out, so I don't need to map that one. Exposure basically is a dollar value figure of what it might cost if the valve blows in the deep sea and oil starts gushing out. Then we've got our treated. You can see a little bit of a change in terminology over time, from probability and impact to likelihood and consequence. And then contingency is how much you're going to spend to mitigate that particular risk, and you can build up your contingency budget through that process. So again, what we've got is the validate button, so we can click that and we've gone horrendously bad. Risk is required. Maybe I've mapped this to the wrong field. Yes, I have. Should have mapped it to the risk So that's like the risk title rather than risk description. So with risks, you can have a heading and then you can drill in and be verbose and explain in full detail what that risk is all about. So I mapped it to risk description. I should have mapped it to risk. But again, the validation thankfully told us quite quickly. Somehow there were 3 empty rows, which I don't care about. So I click import. And the 64 rows imported successfully. So if I close this screen, we now have 64 risks in this project that didn't have any. And that's essentially all the risks that are in that entire presentation system now been imported into one project. All right, so what I'm going to do now is just quickly run through a bunch of others. There's just some subtle nuances to each of them, so it's worth having a quick look. But essentially, you've got the gist of what we're talking about now. And as you scroll across the modules, you'll find that little import button and you can start to explore. And so when you're exploring, the key would be just to, copy some stuff. So this is resources now. If I go to all projects, because that's what I'm doing now is looking at importing people. You can see when I hit import, it's got contacts or resource planning. That button's shifting to resource planning soon. But import contacts, so that's people or organizations. And if I paste in there, I've just pasted risk information, right? So it's totally random stuff, but there is people's names there. So I could actually say, that is a person's contact. Now, when you, and this doesn't have the validate button, it's a little bit older, so that should come back. But when you import someone in Unify, they generally have a location and an organization that they belong to, but they don't have to. And so if I hit save here, you can see that, it's saying, well, I can't import those rows because there's nothing there, so that's fine. And then it says you don't have any mapping to a site. What should I do if the site name is empty? Empty, and what should I do if the contact name is empty? Well, we should probably untick those. So if we untick those, that means they're not going to look at those 3 rows. And then what you can do is say, okay, every time there's a person, we just want them to be applied to the site called account, right? Which is often what's done. If we hit save again, this time it's going to say organization field is empty. And so you would either need to add that organization in or unmap this. Can't unmap it. So you would actually need to manipulate that Excel spreadsheet in the end and have organization. It is possible to just have an individual in Unify, so that might be a slight missing on the import, but most of you would be probably importing people associated to companies. So you need at least 2 columns, and then you can just hardwire in the account as being, or whatever you want to put in there, import contact as the site if you don't have that information. But hopefully otherwise you'd have 3 columns in there, which is what I'm going to look at now. So if I go into my presentation spreadsheets and open up the one called resources, you can see we've got an organization name, site, and contact. So we've got all 3. If I copy that and I reset this and paste it in there, organization, contact, site, position, street, all of that information is now going to be imported in. Hit save and you get lovely green this time. Hover over it, says success, and we can close that down and we've imported those contacts. Again, if you've got an ability to match, it's not going to create a new contact. And one field that's 16.5, I think, again, is this contact ID, which is supposed to represent an employee ID or a CRM ID to enable you to synchronize between different contact databases. So that field hasn't existed forever. We used to use a custom field to do that, which is no longer required. This is a common field. And so you can put in people's employee numbers or a CRM ID into that for that contact when you're generating them the first time, and then on subsequent exports. So when you did this mapping, you could have had, so if I just do it again, you could have had a number instead of a name to synchronize on. So you'll see it has, what am I matching on? So one of the things you can match on ABN. For contact, you can match on contact number if there's data in the system for that. And that's a more robust way. So email is another robust way, better than contact name, because sometimes you have John Smith multiple times and it's actually different John Smiths. If you use contact name, it'll just update John Smith with the different email and different address details. So you need to get a unique identifier for John. Then we get into an interesting one that maybe you're not familiar with. In a project, there is the ability to have what we call periodic custom fields. What they are, periodic means month by month. And so you can see there's a month period there. And so you can create your own categories and custom fields to track statistics that are coming to you via reports. And so this is where you're not using, say, the issues system to track safety, or you haven't got your sales in the system for whatever reason. And you can see here we had an interesting lead with the Wildlife Association tracking cat baiting. And so that stuff might be coming to you from Excel. So instead of having to, key that data in when it comes from Excel, you can actually paste it. And so if I just open up this particular Excel file, you'll see it's subtly different again. This is doing it like for multiple months, but that's going to be rare. You just have your month there and have all of your different fields coming down here. You can do it portfolio based. You can have different project IDs here and it'll map on that. Paste from Excel. Once you do that, it comes up with the mappings again. And so you could say, okay, LTI actually maps to cat baits laid outside fence. Say that 10 times fast. So it doesn't have to you don't have to have this description matching what your description is in Unify is the main thing there. And then once you hit save on that particular screen, it'll import those statistics dynamically into the period. And so go back in time and there should be some statistics coming in based on that import. So I don't know if anyone knows that functionality exists, but we figured that most people would be getting it fed to them. You could even generate a script to import that in via our API as well. You don't have to use Excel. But yeah, the main thing is then you can start to report on these through dashboards and Power BI interfaces for your graphics and the like. There's some interesting template controls for documents for this sort of stuff as well that you might want to look into. All right, there's two more before we get to the 17 versions that you may not be aware of. You saw when I did resources and I hit on all projects, the import button, it had two buttons. So you can actually import resource planning. Resource planning at this level is project and person over time by week. If you go to the contracts module, as I showed, and as I'm going to show in next week's webinar, we show you how you get down to the task level. So you'd have project, task, and person. So you can get much more detailed resource planning from that. That will feed in as a rolled up version into this resource planning module anyway, so that you can use it for percentage allocation across the portfolio, who's over allocated, who isn't. But equally, if you've got an Excel spreadsheet that you're using to develop your resource plan profile, you can then paste it into here to get it into the system. So open that one up. Again, you can do it on a portfolio basis, which means you can get all of your projects done at once. And this is basically representing hours per week that these people are going to be working on this particular project, which could be links that's come from a separate number of spreadsheets. Here, you're just highlighting, copying, pasting the relevant bit, coming back. And you can see that you can choose whether this is a forecast or a budget and whether you've put in percent or hours, and just need to map that to the contact name. So again, it'd be good if you could have the contact ID. It's going to be more robust, but I'll just use resource name. Yeah, and as Simon was just reiterating in the chat, that contact ID is fairly crucial. So if this information is coming from a planning system, there may be a contact ID you can use to make sure that each person's unique and you don't get any conflicts. but that's now applied those hours as a forecast into the past, which is a little bit obtuse. And that's there for you to analyze in the reports on resource planning. And finally, before we get to 17, we have cash flow. So with cash flow, there's actually two methods. Our old method is from CSV, so it's not even Excel, and we provide a sample file for what that should look like. It's quite useful for accounting integration. Sometimes they can serve flat files, and we can upload that through the interface. But equally, the better version, hopefully you all agree now, is the copy and paste. So I've got one last spreadsheet to open up to do that. Again, it can be portfolio based, so you can do one project at a time or the whole portfolio in one go. This tells you what chart of accounts we're using. That's the code that we're going to import the cash flow into the chart of accounts. So we can select cash flow here, otherwise it won't work. And budget. You can see you can even import actuals if you're setting up the system for the first time and there's historical actuals and you want to get that profile, or for past projects and you're trying to get that profile for our benchmarked algorithm, which is really good. So then you can phase future projects using the earned profile of past projects. And so again, if I hit save, it'll look through and validate all of that data and tell me what's not going to happen. Again, it's longer than the validate button, so it doesn't exist, but it still does validate before importing. Would have ticked red, and on hover would have given you the error message if there was anything wrong. You can untick any of these if you didn't want to bring certain data in. All right, so that's copy paste as it's been known from, say, Unify 15 and 16, and now for 17, we've got two more copy paste features. One replaces a file upload, which is contract deliverables, and the other is for invoicing, which is completely new. We had no interface for that prior to this. So I'm going to go into this big and strange contract for a residential building, which is $10.6 million. And you'll see that it's a decent sized contract. I'm at level 2 at the moment. I'm just going to go all and give the system a decent challenge. And while that's loading, you'll see that you've got import and export similar to what I had in the cost module at the beginning of this webinar. So what I'm going to do is use the export function in the same way that I did for the budget, but this time when I import, I'll copy paste. I won't be file uploading. So just have a look at this WBS. We've got just 2 levels, but we do have fairly sizable one. So that's starting to demonstrate the new capability of having deeper contracts in Unify. It's all been coded up with the account codes here. All looking good. And so what we can do is click export. And I'll just click open. So this is the replacement to the old contract deliverables file upload. And we're hoping it's a simpler format for people to work other systems into to get data in. And you'll see that unlike the budget one, the level of the deliverable and the parent-child relationship is just developed through this 1 and 2. So this one will be the parent and this will be the child, this will be a parent, child, so on and so forth. And so once you're happy with that structure, you'll see as well that you can have a schedule, which will be important for next week's webinar, but there's no data for that here. So there's probably no point in actually highlighting that range. It's not required, just this information is. You don't even need any of these dollars and codes. You can actually just paste in your WBS. You could just paste A, B, and C to get things going. And then you could do all the coding and everything else in Unify if you wanted to. Or you could create a reference ID similar to contact ID that enables, so this particular thing here could have been put into there instead. And then you would be able to synchronize this as often as you wish. It'll do it on name as well, but that's a bit risky. And it'll match on reference. So if I come up to the dashboard, I'm just going to create a new contract now. I think we'll before I do, I need to find out what coding structure that contract was to, otherwise I get an error. So it's to the one called post contract. All right, so I'll just go add. So again, this is searchable. It doesn't have to be just the 14. This comes from who's on the project team, but if someone's not on the project team, we can search for, and same on supplier. I'll just select someone there. That's all you need to start things off, although I do need to select post contract here. And this unit is a unit of measure. So if most of the deliverables are going to be meters squared, you can do that and they'll come in by default as a unit of measure. You can see there. And now we just click import, paste. Oops. Lost my copy paste in all of that. There we go. And you can see that I've done this before because it's already mapped the relevant columns. So as I mentioned, once you've done this mapping once, it'll remember it forever, so you never have to map it again. This is new, so it has the validate button, which is quite a comforting button for people before they import a whole heap of data into the system. So it's the testing on 363 rows will take a little time, and then it'll highlight any issues, which there shouldn't be any because I've exported it from Unify directly. So hopefully the spinning wheel of death will finish soon. And there we go. I was completely wrong. It's a beauty. What's wrong with these? It's curious. So it's saying the account code doesn't exist, which I would need to fix if I wanted that to actually come in. So you can see here, for some reason, we had a 100.5 and it got deleted. So that's why those codes couldn't be used. So again, the system coming to the fore there. So what I really need is for these to be 100.2. So if I enable editing on this, okay, let's try again. Whoop, wrong system. The good thing is we haven't got anything here, so it's all still pristine clean because of the validate button. And with a bit of luck, that's obviously going to take a little while. While that's running, I'll go here. So new tabs, and it's still chugging away in the background. Although it may cause grief even with browsing other tabs, in which case try a different browser. I don't want to be Jane Smith. Sorry, Jane. She didn't have enough capabilities in the system. The final export import is on invoicing. And so the concept here is on a tablet or on a laptop, you could go into the field, wrong contract. And before you go, you'd go to the invoice screen and you would select certification or recommendation depending on what job you were doing. I'm going to select recommendation. That'll bring in a whole heap more columns. And you would export. It actually export all levels, but we'll get the gist of it. And then you'll be able to open this file up and enter your quantities. There's one little piece of functionality yet to finish, which is formulas into the Excel spreadsheet so that when you change the quantities, the numbers will change here, but that's coming. So this is the contract amount here. This is the contractor's claim. This is the recommendation amount and the variance and reason. And so the idea is you can type in these values after you'd enable edit, of course, and do that either on this column or this column if you've got quantities. That one wouldn't work. And essentially copy that back into this screen. You can see on the invoice we've got import, paste it back in, and I've never done that before, so I'd have to map all of these levels, and you can see you've got the ID or the reference. So that's that one there, ID. So that's actually brought out the ID from Unify. So you don't need to have a reference, and that makes it more robust. You can't go wrong. So it doesn't matter about level or description because it's going to map on that. So you actually don't even need to map these. All you'd need to do is map the columns that you changed, which in this instance would be the claim quantity. And I change % complete, and then validate and import. And so that way you've got an assessment you've done in the field coming into the system. 363 validated successfully. So we click import, and we'll now have our, that's going back a step. We've just jumped back into Firefox. We're now going to create the same contract again with the same values. Like I said, wouldn't have to have the same values. You could just map level, reference, and description to set that up, and that'll chug along now and eventually create that contract with those deliverables. This is chugging along doing that validation, and they're the two new copy paste imports and the kind of use cases for them. In the same way that if you've scheduled a MS project or P6 schedule, you'll be able to create your contract deliverables by converting. So you import the P6 schedule in the time module, and then you can convert that WBS to a contract or portions of it. So you can see map WBS here. This is the structure that's come in, and you'll be able to hit convert. The button doesn't exist yet, but in 17 it will convert to contracts, and then you can tell it which of these. That could be you're only doing, if it's your contract, it could be a portion of the overall contract. It could be the whole thing. It could be done by a category based off suppliers. And you're basically generating multiple contracts for multiple suppliers that are going to be delivering on that schedule. Just depends on how you set it up. So, while that chugs away, I can answer any questions, and hopefully that's enticed you to upgrade to 17 sooner. And I have way too many Excel files open. Used to be able to do shift something and it'll close them all. Does that still exist? Must be Excel Guru on the line. Does that exist? Shift used to be. Oops. No. Got rid of that at some stage. So I have to close it manually. Any questions, guys? So that's created now. So if I close that screen, drum roll. My chat dialog. Oh no, it's no chat dialog box had covered it up. So yeah, we're still performance tweaking some of these screens. That's taking a bit longer than it should, but I won't let you sit there and watch it. I'm sure you've seen the spinning wheel of death before. So if there aren't any other questions, let me know, and well, don't let me know. Don't say them, and I'll sign off.
Yeah, I just want to say that the invoice input, we've got lots of clients who are managing really large contracts, and basically you're going to be able to take, if the claim comes in Excel from the contractor or from some other source, rather than having to go line by line on hundreds of rows to update things, you're going to be able to import in one hit. It's really exciting.
If it performs a little quicker than that.
Yes.
something for the developers to work on.
Something developers to optimize.
Yeah, but I mean, nothing's stopping you, having lunch or doing something else while that happens in the background.
Yes, maintaining your efficiency elsewhere.
All right, guys, that video will be published soon. Share it around.